Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jalen and today I'm discussing the top 10 books that I've read so far this year and I'm excited about it. So before we get into it, as always, I will share what I'm drinking today. I'm actually filming at night right now, which is not my usual thing, but I was feeling the vibes. I got a new computer and so now I'm actually eager to edit a video. So I'm just gonna take it while the inspiration's hitting me. Let's just go with it. So I have a bottle of wine. It's called Decoy Red Wine from, where is this from? Hopland, California. I don't know where that is. I thought this was a Napa wine, but maybe not. Yeah, I think this goes for like $20 at most grocery stores. I got it at Costco for like 16. Big saver. Yeah, let me go pour myself a glass and I'll be right back. 'Cause you're everywhere to me. And when I close my eyes, it's you I see. Can we talk about the power of Michelle Branch? If you don't know Michelle Branch, exit the video. Just kidding. But seriously, get into it. That song, that album, Hotel Paper, as well, mama. Look at the material. A bop. A bopiana. That's supposed to be more dramatic, but... Come to mama. That was not a great song from Lady Gaga's Joanne, but whenever I say come to mama, I now sing come to mama. For this video, oh, hold on, let me try the wine before I get into it. Getting ahead of myself here. I don't have my, hold on. Okay, the levels of unprofessionalism are too much. Okay, so the wine is lovely. That's nice. Get Decoy if you have it in your area. All right, so I'm gonna get into the top 10 books I read so far this year. I will say I also ranked them to add some drama, some intrigue to the discussion, because for people that watch my channel, you all probably know most of these, I want to say. Maybe you can predict some. Lauren Oyler, I'm a mega fan. Yeah, it was kind of fun ranking them. It was scary. I was emotional. I love all these books so much. I had put some on the chopping block, which was hard. It was a lot. It was a moment for me making this list. But hopefully you'll find it useful. Hopefully you'll find something that you like. This is a mix of fiction and nonfiction. We love that. For number 10, I was stuck between two. I'm not going to do this for every question or for every number in this list, but I'm going to go with You Will Never Be Forgotten, a short story collection by Mary South. I adore this book. Before I get into the book, I will briefly mention this other book that was very close to getting the number 10 spot, and it's Something New Under the Sun by Alexandra Kleeman. I also love that book so much. I just finished it, both of these last month, and they're both they're operating with big themes of internet, of the end of the world, a lot of despair in both these books, but I had to go with You Will Never Be Forgotten because there's one story in this collection that is the best short story, one of the best I've ever read, definitely the best I've read so far this year in itself. So this collection of short stories looks at a bunch of characters, mostly women, that are at some kind of turning point in their life or are dealing with some kind of hardship or some kind of external force on them, and looking at these women and also looking at the internet and technology. And so this book in this collection feels very present, and I thought these were so perfectly crafted. I think every story is endlessly surprising. Every story is exploring something and takes turns that are meant to kind of shook you up a little bit, meant to leave the reader unnerved in the sense that you don't know where the story's going. It always feels like there's a sense of stakes in every story in this collection. And the one story that I thought was so brilliant was Frequently Asked Questions About Your Craniotomy, which follows a brain surgeon who is writing this frequently asked question article that seems to be for a website or something, or for the doctor's website when you are about to have a brain surgery for whatever reason. And so it starts that way. It's pretty bleak, looking at various illnesses that this doctor has to help her patients with, and eventually the questions and answers start going more towards this doctor and not actual brain surgery. So in short, what this is doing is the really interesting way, kind of this call and response of this woman thinking about her life and the bleakness that she sees constantly, in her processing it and dealing with that. And just the turn it took, I was not expecting it. I didn't know where it was going. And when I realized what she was doing in the story, I was like, dude, this is it was incredible. I had the best time. I mean, it was a really bleak story, but just from a reader craft perspective, I was like, this is levels ahead. Like, this is so good. And so every story is dealing with something interesting. Like, in one story, there's this woman who starts following her rapist online, and then she ends up starting to track him down in person. I mean, tense. There's another one where there's a mother who is grieving the loss of her child, and there is a second child that comes about, serve as a replacement, and I'll just kind of leave it vague. But all these stories are so interesting, all really like rooted in this kind of technology and or internet and or present moment. Definitely for those that like some cerebral, meditative, but also like surprising stories. I'm trying to think of a comp. I think if you have read Laura Vandenberg's I Hold a Wolf by the Ears, which is my favorite story collection of all time still, I think you would love this one as well. So yeah, check that out for sure if you like some short stories. Or if you don't. It's good when you're reading a short story collection that's unputdownable because every story is different, but I always wanted to read the next story to see what she was going to do next. So yeah, love that book so much. All right, number 9, I have Assembly by Natasha Brown. This book is also just like gutted me. This book, I wish I could talk about it with spoilers, but I'm not going to. So this book follows, so she's a black woman living in London, and she's a successful financial analyst or advisor or something. Basically, she's well off and she has a boyfriend, and they're planning to go to his parents' estate for a party, basically, and you see the lead up in this character's psyche going to this party. And so she's reflecting on her career, her success, her place as a black woman in London, and generally looking at peering into white supremacy, taking all the pieces of white supremacy and laying them out for the reader and for herself, and basically deciding what to do with that information. And there's a level of stakes to this book that I won't spoil because I think it's best going into it. So I know you know something's coming now that I said that, but like going into it without knowing what it is, because it added so much impact for me when reading this book. I think this book was so surprising. I did not expect it to go to the places it did. There are so many passages here that I was like, wow, like underlining, wanted to share them with people. I love that experience when reading books, and I just think it's such a smart use of contemporary fragmentary structure that's very popular right now. I think this is one of the good ones. I've talked a lot on my channel about what I feel about fragments, and I guess I'm mostly favorable, even though I've kind of been wishy-washy on it. I think it's interesting. I like the switch up in fiction, and I like authors trying to push the boundaries, with autofiction, with fragments. I think all the discussions going on right now about autofiction, including Joyce Carol Oates, she had a pretty infamous tweet recently about this, but yeah, I think this one is a really good use of fragments, and I just thought this one was so smart, so cutting, and just brilliantly told, and it's very, very short. It's like 100 pages, I want to say. I definitely think this will be on the Booker long list, at least. It's just brilliant. It's pushing the boundaries. It's original. I loved it so much. So if any of that sounds good to you, definitely check that out. Amazing. It comes out in September in the US, and it's out now in the UK. So you can wait till September or order it from Blackwell's or wherever you get your UK books. I get mine from Blackwell's because it's free shipping and it's pretty quick. So yeah. And the UK cover is better. Just putting that out there. I wish I had that copy because I love that cover. I'll put it here. She's beaut. Number 8 on my list is Consent, a memoir by Vanessa Springora. I vividly remember reading this book in March and being like, oh, like, this book shook me. I could not put it down, but I was so repulsed and angry. I had such like a response to this book as you should when reading it. The book is Vanessa Springora talking about her teenage years into adulthood when she was groomed by a very acclaimed French writer when she was around 13 and 14 years old. And you see, first of all, how horrific and despicable that is. You see the way that this writer plays into her vulnerabilities, and it's so devastating because you're reading this from the perspective of Vanessa as an adult. And so what really got me about this book was, one, the depictions of her feelings for this writer at the time and now, but also it broke my brain a bit was the way that the societal kind of complicity in what happened, because her mom knew about what happened. People around in like the literary circle and in French society generally knew about this writer's behavior. He wrote about it explicitly in various texts in which he supported explicitly pedophilia, and where people were complicit in this despite knowing his behavior and allowing for children to suffer at the hands of this man and doing nothing about it. And so all of that was just like, I could not believe that this really happened. It was just so shocking to me reading that. And what I do love about this book is it's so redemptive of Vanessa's story, because this writer, he is still alive. I don't recall off the top of my head right now the status of his case, but he would write about her and she knew it was about her. And what this book does is reclaim her story and kind of give an FU to him and say, no, this is my story. And the way she writes it, it's just so cutting, so beautifully written. It's so sharp and concise. It's very like brief chapters, and there's so much emotional stakes here. It was just beautiful reading the power behind her words and seeing her reclaim her story, given just the atrocities that she suffered growing up, and her processing it through this book and being so public about the position that she was in and the horrors that she had to deal with. And yeah, so this book is, of course, a lot, but I think it is a must read for sure. If you've read it, I would love to talk to you about it. And yeah, I feel like I haven't seen this one enough. I know it was pretty talked about when it came out, I guess, in France. It was quite buzzy given the subject matter, but I feel like here in the US, I never see people talking about it. But it is a lot to read, of course, but I think it is so good. So definitely check that out. Of course, trigger warnings going into that one. Number 7, I have the lovely Brandon Taylor's Filthy Animals. This was a story collection that was one of my most anticipated books of the year, and it definitely pulled through for me. I think Brandon Taylor is one of the most exciting writers that we have today. I think he's one of the best writers that we have working today. I think both in fiction and now in nonfiction. If you don't know, he has been writing in a Substack about various topics, a lot of literary criticism, cultural criticism, and his nonfiction writing. He sells himself short. He's very self-deprecating in tweets about his nonfiction writing that he shares on his Substack, but I think honestly it's some of the best writing I think he's done, and I really am hoping that he puts out an essay collection or something, or continues writing nonfiction, because I think his brain and his thinking about books and literature, and he's so exciting. I always want his opinions on things. I feel like I like his perspective, I like his analysis. So that's a side note, but this book is also amazing. This is a short story collection of mostly interconnected stories, but there's some standalones in which we follow primarily this guy named Lionel, who has recently attempted to commit suicide. He is now attending a potluck. He is out of the hospital, and he gets in this interesting love triangle with a couple, a man and a woman, and you see the different relationships kind of bloom between the three of them throughout the rest of the stories, and also some other friends and characters that are introduced in this circle of friends. So this is another collegiate style book in the vein of real life, but I think this one is so cool being able to see some more range from Brandon Taylor. I think Real Life is a masterpiece in my opinion. It was my favorite book of last year, and this one is exploring similar themes, but you get to see some new stories here. Aside from even the interconnected ones, there's some standalone stories that I thought were just incredible, just perfectly crafted stories. You can tell he cares so much about his craft, and he's so well read, so he knows what he's doing. And so it's always good going into a book like this knowing that you're in the hands of a brilliant writer. Like, I just knew going into it that it was going to be amazing, and it pulled through, and it was just so good. But these are stories full of longing about interpersonal relationships. They often feel so cinematic. You feel really like in the midst of these characters, in their tense longing for each other and desire for each other. I love the way he writes about these topics, and yeah, I loved it. If you like short stories, must read. If you liked Real Life, must read. It's a must read generally. So yeah, love that book so much. Coming in at number 6 is Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. I love this book. I think about this book all the time. Torrey Peters is a trans author. This book is deeply exploring and discussing what it means to be a trans person. A lot about trans people, a lot about the implications of detransitioning and the effects of that on the person who chooses to detransition or the people around them. And so this book follows another love triangle between Reese, who is a trans woman, and Ames, who is a man who is detransitioned. Ames is currently involved with his boss, Katrina, and he ends up getting her pregnant. And what brings these three together is that Ames knows that Reese really wants to be a mother, and so he's hoping that he can kind of introduce this idea of a triangle parenthood situation, both to Reese, his ex, and to Katrina, his boss. And so there's a lot of stickiness in that plot generally. However, I think this book is so interesting in its explorations of gender and the ways that it goes full in on the topics, and I just think Torrey Peters is a brilliant mind. I think this is such an exciting and invigorating read for me and for people that have read it. I've been reading a lot of really good reviews about this book. It has so much hype, a lot of love for it, and I think it's so well deserved. Whenever I go into these very hype books, I'm always nervous that it's not gonna pay off, but this one completely exceeded my expectations, honestly. I think if you want a really good, spicy, like love triangle, drama, messy plot, I think you will love this book. But I also think this book has so many brilliant ideas that are discussed with such nuance throughout that I just had a blast reading it, just from a craft perspective as well. I think she balances plot and, in a sense, of theory as well throughout this book really, really well. So love that one too. It's so good. All right, coming in number 5, this book, Acts of Desperation by Megan Nolan. I read this over the course of one weekend. I could not read anything else. I could not put it down. This book is a whirlwind. It is gutting. It deals with so much. This is a very bleak book. Common theme here, I know. But this book follows a woman who is basically navigating her mid-20s and trying to do it through... Sorry, my hair has been all jacked up. And trying to do it through relationships, specifically with this one man. And you see the way that she ends up being desperate for this man, as the title suggests, after he basically gets romantically involved with her, and they have a very, passionate, loving relationship, it seems, at first, and then he kind of abruptly leaves her. And the hollowness that she feels upon him leaving her makes her long for him desperately, and you see her start to self-destruct, essentially, through her behaviors, through her substance abuse issues, through her trying to get it from other men, meaning happiness, and eventually they come back together. But this book, it goes places. I don't want to spoil anything, but this book, if you want to watch, this is like pure depressed woman moving, but it is a bit plotty in the sense that it's very much rooted in this relationship and what's going to happen there. But if you want a book that's rooted in like bleak longing and lots of intense self-destruction, I know that sounds like it's a lot. It is a lot, but I did really like this book from a pure writing perspective. The prose here is just so good. It's so fast-paced. The chapters are super short, so it's really a blast to get through, meaning quick to get through. It's not fun reading about what happens to this character. But yeah, this is another one that I think about a lot, and it actually caused me to start thinking more about what I like in fiction, because I had such a good response to this book generally, and I was like, what is it about this book that I really like? And I ended up making a video about books about longing, and I love that video. I liked thinking about all the books that I've read recently and kind of what are the through lines there. And so that video can kind of show you what I really like, as does this video. But yeah, I love that one. I think more people should read it. It's very, very good. Number 4, the surprise knockout for me this year was The Employees by Olga Ravn. So this one is a translated work. I forget who the translator is. I will put it below. I read this purely because it was on the International Booker shortlist. So I read the shortlist earlier this year, and this book was just beyond. I loved it so much. This book is something I wouldn't normally read. It is a sci-fi dystopian look at this spaceship set in the 2100s, and we follow these employees that are on this spaceship. And so the book is told in statements, so each statement is from a different employee on the ship, and it's told from the perspective of sorts of a committee who is asking the employees about the effects that these various objects that they've recently got from like a planet, I think, how those objects are affecting them in the workplace of this ship. And you see from both the perspective of humans and humanoids what they are feeling on this ship, reflecting on their place in the workplace, reflecting on subtly or sneakily on capitalism generally. And what I love so much about this book is it looks at what it means to be human. Often we don't know whether the person giving the statement is a human or humanoid, and I love that so much. It blurs the line to make you question what does it mean to be human, and really examines the depravity of capitalism, of the workplace, and how it affects both humans and non-humans alike. It really questions, like, what does that mean, and does it matter in this kind of context? And so this book, it's told in statements, and it goes places that are so interesting to me. I loved the payoff of this book. I loved the ending. There's definitely some tension to this book that I really liked. I thought it was purely just going to be just like a collection of statements from the synopsis, but there's a little bit more to it, and I'll let you find out what that is. But I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. I had to put this high up on the list because it was such a surprise for me, something I wouldn't normally read, kind of out of my comfort zone. Generally, I don't really usually read like dystopian sci-fi books like this, but it was so experimental in form and so fun and just so surprising. And the prose, each of the statements is told from, like I said, humans and humanoids, but the way that they write about their feeling and the sense of, again, longing and desperation for happiness in this setting when it's, when it's taken over them completely was just so sad and made me reflect a lot. And I felt for these employees, man. It was it was a lot. But yeah, I love this book. It is so interesting and surprising and innovative and original. Definitely check it out. All right, top three. Going into this video, I knew what the top three were. So if there are three books, well, these are all so good. Every book here I love so much. I just rank them based on vibes purely. I feel like this list could definitely change for me, especially upon rereads. I think this list could definitely change. But my top three of the year, let's go. Number three. This started as number one for most of the year, but it has since been knocked down a little bit. It is A Swim in a Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. I've talked about this book to death, so I apologize if you've seen me talk about this book and repeat myself endlessly, but you should read it. This is a collection of short stories from a bunch of Russian writers and a mix of essays from George Saunders himself. So the general format of this book is that we get a short story from a classic Russian author, and then we get an essay or reflections from George Saunders about the short story form generally, what he loves about it, what he loves about writing himself, his own short stories, the way that the narrative works. So he basically parses through the short story, writes an essay about it, and makes you question as a reader why you had certain responses to things in the short story, makes you question what you liked, what you didn't. Talks about these Russian writers generally and the themes that they're kind of poking at and the ways that those themes underpin most of literature and what the best literature to him does with these themes and the ways you can do it through the short story form. So I'll kind of keep it brief here, but this book is a love letter to the short story form, and I absolutely adore short stories. They are some of my favorite books that I read, and I'm always looking for more. I'm always wanting to read them. I think they're a good respite between novels as well. I really wish more people read short stories, and so that's why I want to keep pushing this book in people's hands, because short stories are the best. I love them. I think it annoys me that they sell less than novels. It's frustrating, but I mean, I get why, but it's just, I don't get why. So yeah, I love this book so much. If you like George Saunders, I've never read anything by him actually, and I really want to now to see the impact or see how he uses like the tips and the analysis that he gives in this book in his own work and kind of reflect on it that way. But there are so many nuggets of inspiration, of tips for readers and writers alike. It's just a treasure chest of happiness for me personally. I love my time reading this book. I want to read it again, kind of. I just want to live in George Saunders' brain for a while, because he seems like a happy dude and he loves writing, he loves reading, and I love that about him. So yeah, love that one. Sorry if you can hear noise in the background. It's my partner's TV. All right, number two is Fake Accounts by Lauren Oyler, another book that I have raved about all year. This is a quintessential internet social media novel, but what I love so much about this book is it's analyzing all of the questions that I have personally about my reading taste, about contemporary literature, about fiction generally, about social media, about the internet, about personhood, about the facades that people create in our present moment, about the Trump years, the effect of those on us. Just a lot of things going on in this book, and it's a piece of autofiction which we love. Lauren Oyler is very preoccupied with autofiction. She has a new book coming out sometime, I don't know when. I think she just sold it. It's coming out, and it's nonfiction about autofiction, in part at least. This book follows a woman who discovers that her boyfriend is a right-wing conspiracy theorist behind her back. Her keeps it a secret, only online, and the fallout that ensues, and her eventually, so she wants to break up with him. Things happen. She goes to Berlin, and she starts dating and putting on these different facades based on astrological signs. In the meantime, discussing fiction generally, discussing many ideas. There's a lot of criticism in this book, which I love. She's a very popular modern critic, and I love her writing. She's so smart. She's so like Brandon Taylor. I need their thoughts on things. Like I will read anything they write. They're just big brained as hell, and I love it. I love reading that because it makes me want to be a better thinker, a better reader. I want to level up and be like Lauren Oyler and Brandon Taylor. Sidebar: both of them in their criticism recently have made me think about like my place as a booktuber, like a consumer reviewer. Like, I'm not a critic or anything by any means, but I do aspire to be better at thinking about books and about thinking about why I like things or why I don't, or just fiction overall. I really that's something I really want to get into for the rest of the year and into next year. Just thinking about my place as a reviewer and thinking about books in a more intelligent way. So yeah, I don't know if you have any literary criticism recommendations, give them to me, because I'm really interested in that lately. So I think a lot of my reading going forward will be at least somewhat related to that. Yeah. Okay. So last but absolutely not least, I will say fake accounts in this next book are quite equal in my mind. I'm picking this one as my favorite because of the emotional response I had to it. Completely arbitrary here. If you want some, I think a little bit more big brained, I would go fake accounts. Read them both. But the last book on this list is the new Sally Rooney novel, Beautiful World, Where Are You? I like this book. I don't mean to hype it up too much. I know this book is already like hyped to death. I understand that. I, going into this book, was like, this isn't going to be like all that in a bag of chips, will it? And it was. This book was amazing. I won't give any spoilers here. We follow 4 characters. Typical Rooney love triangle, love square, but not really. It's 2 relationships that we're looking at mostly, and then friendships between those 2 relationships. And what I love so much about this book is it's looking at all these things that I just talked about. A lot of this book, and what I loved the most about it, was one of the characters, she's a novelist, and she examines what fiction is doing right now, what her fiction is doing, and it's by proxy, it's Rooney thinking about the success of her books, thinking about preoccupied with thinking about the end of the world and what it means to be human, what it means to find purpose and happiness. What should we be doing every day to find that? Are we doing enough to help society? What is the goal with doing all that? What is the purpose when it all seems so futile? What does it mean to find purpose in this world? I think the title is perfect, and you will see why when you read it. If you like Rooney's books, you're going to like this one. I'm telling you right now. It is so good. I don't know if this book will convert any non-Rudy fans, but I think if you didn't like her first 2 books, I think you should still try this one. I think this one is leagues beyond those 2 books. It's kind of meta in looking at her success. And aside from that, just looking at some really interesting characters, so much brilliant prose in this book. I took pictures. So I borrowed this book from a friend who got an early copy, and I was taking pictures of pages. Like, I need to go back and visit this because I had to give it back, the book. And there was just tons of those. And it was one of the most, I never felt more compelled to underline a book than I have, I think, with this one. There's so much I just wanted to sit in the prose. It was just magnificent. Long story short, get your pre-orders in. I can't wait to have my finished copy. I want to reread it so bad. Ugh. All right. Well, that is the top 10. If you've read any of these, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have any recommendations based on these, I would love them. I love a recommendation, so definitely comments are open for that. But yeah, and if you pick up any of these, hope you love them as much as I do. This year has been so good for reading for me so far. I've had so many good books that I've read this year. It was really hard to figure out what to cut from this list. So yeah, we'll see which ones remain on the top 10 at the end of the year. I will definitely be revisiting my top 10, and we'll see who stays. So dramatic. All right. I didn't drink any of my wine, so I'm going to go do that and read the new Jonathan Franzen book, which is so good. Might be in my next top 10 video. Maybe. We'll see how it ends. So until next time, cheers. Why do I not know how to drink? Why? Goodbye, everyone.